People often think of the English electric Canberra or the Boeing B-47 Stratojet when they think of the first jet bombers. These are the first jet bombers that worked well and were made in large numbers. The B-47 would soon be replaced by the B-52, but the Canberra would continue to be used until the 21st century. 3 B-57 Canberras made by Martin under license are still flying with NASA today. What is easy to forget, though, is that Germany made the first jet bomber in the world. In the last few years of World War II, military aircraft technology started to improve, and both the British and the Germans started to think about using jet engines to power their planes. Most people were working on fighters like the Me-262 and the Gloucester Meteor, but the German company Arado was thinking about making a jet bomber. What they came up with would become the world's first jet bomber that could fly, and more than 200 of them would be made. The Arado Ar234 was that plane. The Nazi Air Ministry RLM asked for the project to start in 1940. They wanted a spy plane that was powered by the new turbojets that Junkers and BMW were making at the time. At first, the plane was called the E-370, but later it was changed to the Ar234. The fuselage of the plane was made to be narrow, and the wings were put on top of the fuselage. The attachment points for the jet engines were located on the underside of the wing surfaces. Because RLM desired a plane with a long range, the majority of the aircraft was taken up by fuel tanks. The Ar234 had a range of 1,243 miles or 2,000 kilometers. Because the tanks took up such a large amount of room, there was not enough space for a conventional undercarriage. The problem could only be solved by using a central skid for landing and a detachable mounted trolley for takeoff. This was Arado's solution. However, in later models, these were eliminated because it was determined that the landing skid presented an unacceptable level of risk and was in a state of disrepair. The plane couldn't move on its own once it landed on the skid, so it had to wait for a special truck to take it back to the main hangars. This left it open to strafing attacks from the Allies because it was just sitting there. This problem was finally fixed in later models by moving the fuel tank in the middle out of the way and raising the nose wheel behind the pilot ejector seat. The first flight of the Ar234 took place in 1943, and a total of 8 prototypes were made. The landing gear was one thing that was wrong at first. Arado made the first plane with a trolley. At first, the trolley would stay on the plane, but later prototypes would throw it away when taking off because it made landing dangerous. 2 of the later prototypes also had 4 engines instead of 2. They were the first jet planes in the world to have 4 engines. The Ar234 would eventually have a narrow track undercarriage. This was seen on the last prototype, which was the first 234B version. Soon, the Ar234B would be put to work, and it didn't take long for them to show what jet planes could do. Once the type went into service in late 1944, the Ar234B would become the main service plane. But even the early versions of the skid trolley did have a use. They were used to find out what was going on. It didn't take long for it to get the name Blitz, because the skid trolley planes were so fast that they couldn't be stopped. They took pictures of the Normandy bridgehead while anti-aircraft fire either missed them or never had a chance to hit them. The Germans had high hopes for their new jet force, especially since the Me-262 was now being used by the Luftwaffe. Even more, hope was given when the bomber version, the 234B, and the skid trolley prototypes were finally put to use. Soon, their pilots were impressed by how fast and agile they were. During the Battle of the Bulge, they were used for the first time in the battle against Allied forces in the city of Liege. 9 of the 234Bs suddenly appeared, dropped their cargo, and flew back to base so fast that no Allied fighter could catch them. In 1945, they were used most famously to attack the Ludendorff Bridge at Remagen. 234Bs kept attacking the bridge until it fell down. The first 2 planes to be used in the war were the V5 and the V7. They were sent to France right after the D-Day landings, but only 1 plane made it there because its engine broke down. It only went on 3 flights, each lasting about 10 minutes, to take pictures of the whole area occupied by the Allies, from Avranches to Caen. This was the first mission the Ar234 went on, and it didn't run into any trouble. The following week, they launched attacks against air bases that belonged to the Allies. They launched another assault on Liege, Bastogne, and Antwerp in the month of January 1945. In February, additional AR234s were converted into bombers. However, by that point, it was already too late. Throughout the entirety of the war, the Luftwaffe struggled with a shortage of fuel, which essentially rendered their planes inoperable. The 234th Bombardment Group's final act was to drop bombs on the bridge at Remagen in an effort to prevent the Americans from advancing. During the course of the event, 5 planes were destroyed. In the weeks that followed, additional planes were converted into bombers. However, the Allies were never given the opportunity to put them into service. Even though it looked good at first, the AR234 did not have a trouble-free life. Due to the weight of some of the weapons and fuel, some 234s were given liquid-fueled rocket boosters called Starthilf Walter. These were then thrown away after the plane took off. The Junkers JUMO engines were also hard to predict, and the 234 had a lot of trouble with them going out of control all the time. Now that Allied forces were deep inside or close to German territory, they could attack the planes as they took off, and most planes would just stay at their bases and wait for fuel that would never come. A night fighter version was planned, but the 2 planes that were built were not good for flying at night, and the 234C version was never built. During the Second World War, jet aircraft technology was still very much in its infancy, so there was no assurance that the AR234 would even be able to take off from the ground. Even though it had a limited effect on the outcome of the war, it influenced the entire future of bomber aircraft design and came at a time when Germany really was pushing its military technology to the limit. What the Germans were able to achieve is nothing short of remarkable, bringing the world's first jet bomber into operational service. Even though it had a limited effect on the outcome of the war, it influenced the entire future of bomber aircraft design. It's possible that the AR234 was ahead of its time, but it's almost unsettling to think about what it could have accomplished if it had been put into service even just a couple of years earlier than it was. Remarkably, one of these aircraft, bearing the serial number 140,312, has been preserved until the present day. She is now on display at the Stephen F. Udvar-Hazy Center alongside the sole surviving Dornier Do-335. This is both to serve as a reminder of what Germany was occasionally capable of, as well as to ensure that future generations will have the opportunity to get a close look at the world's first jet bomber. That's it for today, guys. Be sure to hit the subscribe button to get the latest update about the fresh and interesting content we keep on posting. See you in the next video.